promise not to use the example that David gave us of how easy it is for the FBI to screw up something as simple as interviewing the right person for a federal job, security clearance, as clear an example of why we should not entrust yet additional secret surveillance powers to the government. I promise not to make such an example. Better, more domestic surveillance than another 9/11? I don't know how to put it quite delicately enough, but not just no, but hell no. The government doesn't need it. The government has shown it doesn't deserve it. The government has not justified it. The government will abuse additional domestic surveillance power, as sure as we are sitting here this evening, and the people of this great land and those who lawfully visit this country as well cannot afford it. Now, why can't we afford it? Many of us here, many of you all may be here this evening because you have a particular privacy concern, a particular category of information that you believe ought to be or continue to be private from government snooping, from government surveillance. Or you may not have a particular category of such information yourself, but others might, and you support them in maintaining the secrecy, the privacy, the privilege of maintaining that information for themselves. But I suspect that deep down, at least most of us are here this evening because we understand that privacy is more than simply the sum total of individual aspects of information that we want to retain private. Ayn Rand, that great philosopher who just 2 years ago, I believe it was, we celebrated the centennial of her birth, and that great proponent of freedom, put it perhaps best when she wrote in 1943, in the middle of World War II, in the Fountainhead, that privacy is the essence of civilization itself. Yes, it is that important. Civilization is the march of mankind toward a realization and an acceptance of and a protection of the basic right to privacy. I think our founding fathers understood that when they crafted the Bill of Rights. They didn't feel the need to mention in each one of those, this is a privacy right, but just look at them and you see the importance of privacy embodied in the foundation of the First Amendment. Were it not based on a notion that we have a right to the privacy of our religious, political views, for example, there'd be no reason to have the First Amendment. The Second Amendment, so much in the news these days, also is founded in essence on the notion of privacy. If we, as creatures of God, did not enjoy the inherent right to the privacy of our being, of our property, then there would be no reason to have a Second Amendment which is designed to implement the protection of those ideas, those properties, those persons. The right to privacy, the right to have your ideas, your privacy, your property, your person free from unwarranted government intrusion is indeed the essence of civilization. That's why it's so important that we address this issue. The question, better, more domestic surveillance than another 9/11? Look at what we're talking about here. We're not talking about the legitimate function of government in a national security context to gather intelligence on foreigners, foreign intelligence. What we're talking about is our government surveilling us, and they ought to be held, and the Fourth Amendment requires them to be held to a very high burden. Why? Because our founding fathers recognized that if we allowed the government to intrude into our lives, other than in those areas where it has an articulable, legitimate need to pierce that sphere of privacy that surrounds each one of us, if we allow that, then we are not free. Think back. This question also talks about another 9/11 feeder. Of course, the driving force for virtually every effort by the federal government, and indeed by state and local governments since 9/11, to justify whatever expanded government power it is that they seek. But we're talking about another 9/11. Well, let's think about 9/11. Did 9/11 happen? Did those awful terrorists succeed on 9/11 in this very city and in our nation's capital and in that field in Pennsylvania? Did they succeed because the government was not able to increase its surveillance of those of us in this country? No. Those terrorists succeeded because of a series of tragic mistakes and blunders by government. Our government didn't use the tools that were already available to it. It could have stopped those terrorists at any number of points along their horrible journey. There were laws, repetitive laws, on the books at the federal and the state level to stop them from gaining access to the information that they needed, from gaining access to the tools whereby they carried out their horrible deeds. It wasn't because the government lacked sufficient power to surveil Americans. It is a false premise. And what has the government done since then? And what is it even doing now? I guarantee you, if this question, better, more domestic surveillance than another 9/11, is answered by the American people, not just here this evening, but writ large, then you will never, ever see the end of government surveillance power. Sort of like being a divorce lawyer, something I do not do. No matter how much you concede to the other side, they always want more. So it is with domestic surveillance. Even today, this administration, which has violated the laws limiting its ability to conduct domestic surveillance, it wishes and is seeking legislation to gain even more access to our private lives, and get this, the final irony, to grant immunity for past violations of the law. Better, more domestic surveillance than another 9/11? Not on your life. Thank you.